Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Kensington Villa perched atop a hill overlooking Los Angeles, its marble walls and floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Inside, every object spoke to the wealth and success of Richard Kensington, a respected but reclusive businessman. Yet beneath the luxury and opulence lay an emptiness that could not be filled. 2 years earlier, his only son Ethan had been snatched from his life in a tragic accident. Since then, Richard had lived with a silent pain, every room in the house reminding him of his child's lost youth, an abandoned soccer ball, framed drawings, and above all a gold necklace engraved with his initials, which he believed was gone forever. That morning, Richard had hired Carlos Martinez, a young, humble and hardworking pool builder, to maintain his pool. He didn't yet know that this simple daily gesture would revive memories he thought were buried and that a small forgotten object would turn his world upside down. As Carlos was cleaning the lawn, a golden sparkle caught his eye. When he picked it up, he didn't know he was holding it in his hands. The last tangible link with Richard's son, and for Richard, the mere sight of that jewel would transform his pain into a mixture of emotion, nostalgia and, perhaps, rebirth. Fate sometimes has a strange way of knocking on your door, in the most humble and unexpected form. And that day, it had just knocked on Richard Kensington's door. Richard Kensington sat in his glass-fronted office, overlooking the pool, which shimmered in the Californian sun. Every reflection on the water reminded him of afternoons spent with his son, Ethan. He remembered his laughter, his wild runs around the pool, and the necklace he had given him for his 10th birthday. The piece, intricately engraved with his initials, E.K., had since become Richard's last tangible connection to the child he had lost. The villa, magnificent and luxurious, was a showcase of wealth and success, Italian furniture, master paintings hung on the walls, and perfectly manicured gardens. Yet, despite all this opulence, a huge void lived within Richard. The businessmen and partners around him respected his wealth, but none could fill the void left by Ethan. That morning, his assistant, Laura Bennett, entered with a slight smile. "Mr. Kensington, the pool contractor has arrived. Carlos Martinez. He's about to start the interview." Richard nodded without looking up. "Very well. Let him do his job properly." His voice was cold, almost mechanical. Laura knew he was speaking more to her son's shadow than to her. A few minutes later, a young man wearing a simple t-shirt and work pants appeared in the main aisle. He was carefully carrying his tools and cleaning bucket. His brown eyes, honest and attentive, reflected a certain curiosity about the opulent world he was entering. "Hello, Mr. Kensington. I'm Carlos, the pool man. I'll be taking care of your pool today." His voice was calm and respectful, but tinged with a quiet assurance. Richard stood up slowly, walked over to the bay window, and watched the man at work. He was focused, methodical, and yet simple. Richard felt a strange fascination. This simplicity reminded him of life before wealth, when he and Ethan had played, without luxury, simply happy to be together. Meanwhile, Carlos began cleaning the garden and the pool area. Every gesture was precise, every movement deliberate. He didn't yet know that, among the leaves and grass, lay a small golden object that would change the course of the day. Richard, sitting a few meters away, felt his heart sink. He didn't know why, but he had a feeling this day wasn't going to be like any other. The warm morning air seemed to carry with it a silent promise. Something unexpected would happen, something that would bring him back to his son, if only as a memory. Fate, he thought, sometimes has a strange way of knocking on your door, and it had just knocked on his. Carlos Martinez walked slowly around the pool, sweeping leaves and picking up debris. He knew his stuff, but every villa he visited was different. Richard Kensington's was exceptional, rare plants, immaculate marble, and crystal-clear water reflecting the blue Los Angeles sky. Despite all this luxury, Carlos couldn't help but notice the almost cold atmosphere that reigned in the house. As he was picking up some gravel near the edges, a shard caught his eye. He bent down and picked up a small gold necklace, finely engraved. His fingers brushed against the engraving, E.K. He frowned, intrigued. This was no ordinary jewel, it was elegant, fragile, and charged with a kind of silent presence. Carlos sat up and looked around, searching for the owner of the item. He knew Richard Kensington was rich, but he had no idea that this simple necklace could have such profound meaning. Richard, from his office, noticed the movement and approached the bay window. His eyes froze when he saw the necklace in Carlos's hand. His heart raced, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This necklace was the one he had given to Ethan, his missing son. He felt a wave of emotion wash over him, a mixture of pain and nostalgia. All around him, the luxuries seemed to fade, giving way to a pure and powerful memory. He approached Carlos, his voice trembling despite himself. I think what you're holding is very important. Carlos, surprised by Richard's tone, answered honestly. I found it while cleaning, sir. It had fallen in the grass. I didn't know who it belonged to. Richard took a step forward, his eyes shining. Every detail of the necklace reminded him of Ethan, the day he'd given it to him, the boy's radiant smile, his slender hands clutching the jewel with pride. The memories, buried for so long, resurfaced with intensity, almost painful. Carlos held the necklace out to him, hesitant, sensing the object's importance. Richard took the jewel with slightly trembling hands, clutching it to his chest as if to recapture a piece of his lost son. A heavy silence fell over the garden. The sound of water in the pool, the distant song of birds, everything seemed to fade away, giving way to pure emotion. Richard finally murmured, almost to himself. Ethan, it's you, I think it's you. Carlos, touched by the scene and realizing that he was holding a piece of this man's past in his hands, remained silent. He had never imagined that a simple necklace could contain so much memory and love. That day, the routine of cleaning a pool became the beginning of an unexpected connection between two men, a bond born of a piece of jewelry and deeply human memories. After the necklace incident, Richard stood by the bay window, clutching the jewel in his hand. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, shone with a new, almost fragile emotion. Carlos, still kneeling by the lawn, felt the weight of the silence. He had never seen such a wealthy man react with such vulnerability. Richard took a deep breath, trying to regain control of his emotions. I think that necklace belonged to my son. Ethan, my son died 2 years ago. His voice cracked slightly, revealing a pain he had long suppressed. Carlos gently placed the necklace on the edge of the lawn and stood up. His brown eyes met Richard's with respect and understanding. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't know. Richard nodded, his throat tight. I know. It's not your fault. He paused, searching for the words. It's just, that necklace is the last tangible memory I have of him. Holding it in my hands, it's like having a part of my son back, even if just for a moment. Carlos felt the sincerity in every word. He had never met a man who, despite all his wealth, carried such emotional weight. If you want, I can help you clean it, restore it. So, you can keep it close to you. Richard gave a weak smile. It was the first time in months he'd felt a bit of human warmth, a real connection with someone who wasn't looking for anything in return. Thank you, Carlos. That's sweet. I think this necklace deserves more than just a box. It deserves to be seen, smelled, remembered. They settled down by the pool. Carlos carefully cleaned the necklace, using a soft cloth and a liquid suitable for gold. Meanwhile, Richard talked about Ethan. He recounted anecdotes from his childhood, his little quirks, his laughter, his dreams. Each word brought back a vivid image of the missing boy, and Carlos listened attentively, respecting the silence of pain. He loved playing by the pool, Richard said, a sad smile on his face. Even when I told him not to run, he would laugh and keep going. That necklace, it was his treasure. He never took it off. Carlos nodded, touched. I understand, it's more than a piece of jewelry. It's a memory, a piece of him. Richard, looking at the now clean and shiny necklace, felt a mixture of sadness and gratitude. For the first time in a long time, he felt less alone. The necklace, fragile and golden, had become a bridge between the past and the present, between pain and the beginnings of healing. As the sun slowly sank behind the hills of Los Angeles, the pool water shimmered like a mirror of the sky. In that garden, two men, from completely different worlds, shared a silent but profoundly human moment. And Richard understood that sometimes life could offer unexpected miracles, even in the humble form of a necklace found by a young pool attendant. Evening was falling gently over the Kensington villa. The last rays of sunlight bathed the pool in a golden light, and Richard stood by the water, the necklace still clutched to his chest. Every detail of the jewel revived memories he had tried to repress since Ethan's death, his bursts of laughter, his insatiable curiosity, the stories he would make up by the pool to make his father laugh. Carlos, putting away his tools after a day's work, watched Richard with a certain caution. He sensed the man's frailty, but he didn't want to invade his pain. Yet the necklace, glittering in the twilight light, seemed almost to call them both to a moment of sincere sharing. Richard broke the silence, his voice trembling but resolute. "You know, I never realized how much memory an object could hold. Every time I look at it, I see Ethan again. I see his face, his hands, his smile." Carlos approached, gently, as if to avoid disturbing the fragile balance of this emotion. "It's normal, sir. Some memories are too strong to be erased. And sometimes, a simple object can bring them back to life." Richard nodded, his eyes fixed on the necklace. "For 2 years, I tried to move on with my life, to focus on work, on my business. But nothing replaces what you lose. Nothing replaces my son." Carlos was silent for a moment, considering how best to respond. "I believe, this necklace wasn't just returned to you. It gives you a chance to remember, but also to keep a part of him with you. Even now." Richard looked up at Carlos, surprised by the depth of his words. For the first time, he felt understood by someone who didn't know his world, someone who wasn't attracted to his wealth or status. "You're right. You understand something that few people do." A breath passed between them, light but full of meaning. The villa, with all its luxury and opulence, seemed to fade away around them. All that remained was the necklace, the memory of Ethan, and the beginnings of an unexpected bond between two men from opposite worlds. Richard gently ran his fingers over the necklace, feeling the engraving beneath his fingers. Each letter was a caress of memory, each glint of light a reminder of the past. And in that gentle melancholy, he felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, despite the loss, he could still find some form of peace and connection with life. Evening fell, and the villa, silent and majestic, seemed to hold its breath. The necklace shone, fragile but powerful, like a promise that some memories never fade and that sometimes, fate knocks at your door in the most unexpected form. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the large bay windows of the Kensington villa, illuminating the pool and the immaculately manicured gardens. Richard stood by the water, holding Ethan's necklace, his gaze lost in memory. Every detail of the jewel reminded him of specific moments with his son, the sunny afternoons, the hearty laughter, the stories he'd invented to make him smile. Carlos, faithful to his work, prepared his tools and began cleaning the pool. But this time, Richard didn't just watch. He decided to speak, to share a fragment of his pain, and perhaps find some comfort in this unexpected encounter. "Carlos," he began, his voice trembling. "I want you to understand, this necklace is not just a piece of jewelry. It is the last tangible memory I have of my son. His name is Ethan. He left, 2 years ago." Carlos stopped, surprised by the intensity of Richard's emotion. I'm so sorry, sir. I had no idea. I didn't know how important he was." Richard nodded, his eyes shining. "I know. It's not your fault. But holding this necklace in my hands, it's like rediscovering a part of him, even if just for a moment. And now, I realize I need to talk, to share these memories." Carlos, touched, approached gently. "If you want, I can listen. Sometimes talking about those we love and have lost helps keep them alive in our hearts. A faint smile appeared on Richard's face. For the first time in years, he felt he could confide in someone who wasn't looking for anything in return. He recounted stories from Ethan's childhood, his quirks, his laughter, his insatiable curiosity, and the simple moments they had shared by the pool. Carlos listened attentively, respecting the silence between words, aware that what he was hearing was not simply a story, but a deeply personal and precious slice of life. Every time I look at this necklace, Richard continued, his voice filled with emotion, I see Ethan again. I see his slender hands clutching the jewel with pride, his smile lighting up the whole house. And now, thanks to you, I can hold it again. Carlos placed a reassuring hand on Richard's shoulder. I'm glad I was able to find it for you. Even if it's only a small gesture, it seems like that necklace needed to be back in your hands. A silence fell, but this time it was no longer heavy with pain. It was filled with gratitude and connection. In this immense villa, amidst luxury and marble, a moment of pure humanity had just been born, the improbable encounter between a man broken by loss and a young pool builder who, unknowingly, had just given him back a part of his life. Richard held the necklace close to him one last time before carefully placing it on the edge of the pool, letting the morning light make the gold shine as if to celebrate the return of a lost fragment of his son. And in that simple gesture, he felt that a new chapter in his life could begin, a chapter where the memory of Ethan would no longer be just painful, but one of emotion, connection, and hope. In the following weeks, Carlos continued to work regularly at the Kensington villa, maintaining the pool and garden with his usual efficiency. But what had begun as a simple employer-pool maintenance relationship slowly evolved into something deeper and more unexpected. Richard, who previously always kept his distance from others and his emotions, found himself looking forward to Carlos's visits. Every morning when he arrived, he brought with him not only his tools, but a sincere, simple, and honest presence, which contrasted with Richard's self-serving entourage. One afternoon, as the sun hit the pool and Carlos was clearing away fallen leaves, Richard approached and said, "You know, Carlos, I think I forgot how comforting it is to talk to someone who doesn't judge you for what you have." Carlos smiled, wiping his hands on his pants. "I'm just a pool guy, sir. But I believe everyone needs someone to listen to them, no matter what their world." Richard nodded, his eyes following Carlos's precise movements. "You understand something few people do. It's strange, but I feel lighter when I talk to you." That day, for the first time in a long time, Richard shared a happy memory of his son that he had never told anyone. Ethan loved to invent treasure hunt games around the pool, hiding objects and challenging his father to find them. Richard laughed softly as he recounted how he had always been fooled, letting Ethan win every time, just to see that bright smile. Carlos listened attentively, touched by the tenderness of these memories. "He must have been an incredible boy," he murmured. "He was," Richard replied, staring at the necklace on the edge of the pool. "And now, thanks to this necklace, I feel like I can feel him a little closer to me. Even if it's just for a moment." As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. Richard began inviting Carlos to the villa for coffee, and sometimes to share an impromptu lunch by the pool. They talked about everything and nothing, family, work, memories, and sometimes even dreams for the future. Carlos became an unexpected confidant. He wasn't rich or famous, but he possessed a humanity Richard had long overlooked in his inner circle. And Richard, despite years of hiding his pain behind success and luxury, found himself appreciating this genuine friendship. One evening, as the sun set and the golden reflections danced on the water, Richard placed his hand on Carlos's shoulder. "Thank you, for everything. For this necklace, for listening, and for reminding me that there are still simple, real people in this world." Carlos smiled, touched but humble. "I'm just doing my job, sir. But I'm glad it means something to you. Sometimes the little things make the biggest difference." That evening, Richard realized that life could offer unexpected miracles. Not only had the necklace been returned to him, but a rare and genuine friendship had emerged from this unlikely encounter. And for the first time since losing Ethan, Richard felt a faint breath of peace pass through his heart. A few days after their last lunch by the pool, Richard examined Ethan's necklace again. It shone softly in the morning light, each engraving telling the story of a child who had brightened his life. But this time, his gaze lingered on the reverse of the pendant, which he had never really examined before. His eyes widened when he discovered an almost imperceptible inscription, "Forever in my heart." Each letter, delicately engraved, seemed to contain all the tenderness and love his son had wanted to convey. Richard felt an intense emotion wash over him. It was as if Ethan was speaking to him through the necklace, offering him one last message, one last connection with him. Carlos, who was cleaning the pool a few steps away, noticed the intensity of Richard's gaze. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice cautious but curious. Richard slowly turned the necklace towards him, his hands trembling slightly. "Look, there's something I've never noticed. An inscription. Forever in my heart. It's Ethan talking to me, even now." Carlos knelt down to get a better look, impressed by the fine, delicate engraving. "It's incredible, he left a message for you, so you can always feel his presence." Richard felt a wave of warmth and nostalgia wash over him. For months, he had believed that everything that connected him to his son was lost. But this small, fragile, golden jewel had just rekindled the strength of his memories and offered him an unexpected connection to Ethan. "I think, this necklace wasn't just given back to me," Richard whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It was given back to me to remind me that some memories never die. That the love you carry never fades, even when the person is no longer with you." Carlos nodded, understanding the depth of the moment. Sometimes it's the little things that carry the greatest messages. A piece of jewelry, an engraving, and a whole world of memories is reborn. Richard, holding the necklace to his chest, felt a peace he hadn't felt in years. He realized that fate had chosen this precise moment to offer him a quiet miracle, the chance to reconnect with Ethan, to feel his presence and his love, even after the loss. This discovery transformed Richard. The necklace was no longer just a memory. It had become a living symbol of Ethan's love, a reminder that the bond between a father and son could survive beyond time and death. That day, by the pool reflecting the first light of morning, Richard smiled for the first time in a long time. Past and present came together in that simple jewel, and the future, for the first time in years, seemed full of hope and light. As the weeks passed, Richard Kensington began to see his life in a new light. Ethan's necklace, lying by the pool, reminded him daily that some memories could remain alive, even after loss. But he also understood that he had to make a choice, remain locked in his grief or open himself up to others again, to honor his son's memory and regain a part of his life. One morning, as Carlos was preparing the pool for an inspection, Richard invited him to sit on the lounge chairs by the water. "Carlos, I want to talk to you about a choice I have to make," he began, his voice deep but calm. Carlos sat down, intrigued. "I'm listening, sir." Richard took a deep breath. "I've spent too much time living in the past, letting pain define every moment of my life. But I realize now, that holding on to this weight isn't doing Ethan justice. He wants me to move on, to enjoy life, to create new memories." Carlos nodded, respecting the gravity of her words. "It's difficult, but it's also the best way to keep him alive in your heart. By living fully, you honor his memory." Richard smiled, a rare and genuine smile. "Exactly. And you played an unexpected role in this process. You helped me find not only this necklace, but also a part of myself that I had lost. A part that needed to reconnect with the world, with life." Carlos seemed surprised by the emotion in Richard's voice. I'm just doing my job, sir. But I'm glad I could help." Richard placed a hand on Carlos's shoulder, a simple gesture but one heavy with gratitude. "No, Carlos. It's not just your work. It's your humanity that makes the difference. And for the first time in a long time, I feel able to move forward, to live with my memories instead of letting them overwhelm me." That evening, after Carlos left, Richard sat by the pool with the necklace in his hands. He thought about Ethan, his laughter, his energy, and everything he had lost. But he also thought about the future, about all the things he could still experience, all the people he could still meet, and the possibility of creating new human connections, authentic and sincere. For the first time in 2 years, Richard Kensington felt a chapter of his life slowly closing, not with pain, but with gratitude and hope. And in that silence, by the pool lit by the evening reflections, he understood that his son's memory could accompany him without preventing him from living. The choice was made: he would open himself to life, create connections, and honor Ethan by transforming pain into light, memories, and shared humanity. A few days after making the decision to open up to life again, Richard invited Carlos to lunch at the villa. It wasn't a formal lunch, nor a business meeting. It was a moment intended to celebrate their budding friendship and share a simple, yet profoundly human, moment. They sat down by the pool, the sun filtering through the trees and the reflections of the water dancing gently on their faces. Richard looked at Carlos and said, with a genuine smile, "Carlos, I want to thank you for everything. For the necklace, for listening, for being there. What you did goes far beyond just a job." Carlos shook his head humbly. "I only picked up what I found, sir. But I'm glad it means something to you." Richard leaned in slightly, his gaze serious but warm. "No, what you did was much more than that. And I want you to know that I really appreciate it. So, I want to give you something." Carlos blinked in surprise. "I didn't expect that." Richard took a small leather bracelet with a thin engraved silver plaque out of his pocket. "It's simple, but I want you to keep it. As a symbol of gratitude and friendship. Because what you've done for me is as precious as this necklace is to me." Carlos, moved, carefully took the bracelet. "Thank you, Mr. Kensington. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Richard replied, smiling. "Just accept it. Consider it a symbol that sometimes the most unexpected connections are the most precious." They spent lunch talking about everything and nothing: family, childhood memories, dreams they'd never dared to share. The villa, usually silent and cold, seemed to resonate with warmth and humanity. For the first time, Richard understood that material wealth was nothing compared to the bonds one creates with others, to empathy and sincerity. At the end of the day, as the sun set and the last golden reflections danced on the water, Richard looked at Ethan's necklace and Carlos's bracelet. The two objects represented different forms of connection: the former, a sacred and intimate memory; the latter, a symbol of gratitude and friendship. Together, they formed a perfect balance between past and present, pain and joy, loss and rebirth. That night, Richard felt like an important chapter in his life had turned. The past would always be with him, but now he knew he could build bridges to the future, share emotions, and live life to the fullest, without denying Ethan's memory. And in that simple act of giving a bracelet, Richard understood that true wealth did not lie in gold or material goods, but in the hearts we touch and the bonds we sincerely forge. The following days were calm and peaceful at the Kensington villa. The pool still reflected the blue Los Angeles sky, but for Richard, it now symbolized a connection to life rather than just a painful memory. Ethan's necklace sat on the nightstand in his bedroom, beside his bed, gleaming softly in the morning light. Each day, he looked at it with tenderness and gratitude, feeling his son's presence and the love they shared, intact despite time and loss. Carlos continued his work, but their relationship had evolved. He was no longer just the pool attendant; he had become a friend, a confidant, a witness to Richard's emotional rebirth. Together, they shared simple moments: coffee by the pool, discussions about life, and sometimes, peaceful silences where the sound of the water was enough to fill the space between them. One morning, as Richard and Carlos finished cleaning the pool, Richard took a deep breath. "You know, Carlos, I thought I would never find peace after losing Ethan. But today, I feel like I can. Because of you, and because of this necklace, I have regained something I thought I had lost: the ability to feel, to connect with others, to live with my memories rather than being trapped by them." Carlos smiled, humble but sincere. "I'm glad it could help you. Sometimes just remembering the good things, and sharing those memories, can make a big difference." Richard looked at the necklace, then at the bracelet he had given Carlos. The two objects symbolized everything he had learned in recent weeks: memory, love, friendship, and the strength of human bonds. He understood that the pain of loss never completely disappeared, but that it could coexist with peace and joy, if one dared to open oneself to life. He smiled softly, feeling an inner warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. "Ethan, I still hold you in my heart. And now I can move forward, honoring your memory while living my life to the fullest." Carlos, watching Richard, also sensed the depth of this moment. This was no longer just an employer-employee relationship, it was a genuine connection, born of pain, transformed by compassion and sincerity. As the sun set behind the hills, the pool reflected flashes of gold and red. Richard sat at the edge of the pool, the necklace in his hand, and breathed deeply. He knew that, even in moments of solitude, he was never truly alone. Ethan's memory, Carlos's presence, and the power of memories were now with him, ready to accompany him through every stage of his life. And in this peaceful silence, surrounded by luxury and light, Richard Kensington finally found what he had been looking for 2 years: peace, resilience, and the hope that the human heart can heal, even after the greatest of losses.